Live streaming, FAA, drone certification, pilot's licensing, and getting access to controlled airspaces. Let's talk about that today. But before we do that, I want to let you know that this video is not sponsored. So if you see anything that you like in here, there will be Amazon links down below that you can pick up your own, and it'll give me a couple of dollars in a kickback. So I appreciate that. Let's start off right off the bat. Live streaming, right? So you have something you want to share, and during the time of Corona and the pandemic and everything that's going on, that's become more important than ever. Even as different places begin to open up some more, the concept of social distancing is really becoming a part of Americans' identity in many ways. Some of you just cringed because I said that, but it is. And if you want to operate a business successfully, you're going to have to abide by at least state and local laws as far as social distancing goes. That means that many people are still live streaming even as the United States open back up, because it's easier to live stream and have everyone there to watch when they can't be there physically. So live streaming, for that reason, is pretty simple. And the concept, if you're unaware, is just connect a camera, connect to a web server, and then show what you want to show. But it is so much more difficult than that and more nuanced than that as well. There are several different platforms that you can go by. You can go all digital, which would be everything's working over in the web app space, right? Like live streaming through your browser using something like StreamYard, which is an excellent service. I like StreamYard a lot, not sponsored. You can also move out of the digital web-hosted live streaming and go closer to home, something that's done on your computer through something like open broadcast software. This is probably the best quality result. It gives you the ability to have total control over everything when you're streaming on your computer. But it also means that you have to know quite a bit. So this is kind of more technical to get into. And you can use open broadcast software or XSplit, OBS or XSplit. There are some other ones as well. And then finally, there are some additional servers out there or services or hardware that makes streaming easy without a computer, such as YoloBox. But what makes YoloBox so nice is it takes all of this supporting equipment, like when you go out to stream on location. See, if you're streaming in your house, then most of what I'm saying doesn't matter. Or if you're streaming in a studio, it doesn't normally matter because, well, you don't have to go anywhere. And you have access to the main power, and you have access to all of your cameras and your battery, and you can set it up, and sound can be perfect, and lighting and everything can be all done. But when you're on location, it's way easier to attach this to the top of your camera and then go and do something, where is a lot more difficult to bring your laptop, then bring a power supply to power your laptop for an extended period of time, and then a table to put the laptop on, and then a visor, a sun visor to shade the laptop so that you can see what you're doing, and then a chair to sit there. So if you're on a beach or something like that, things become a lot more difficult with a laptop. And don't forget the wireless hotspot. Now, YoloBox has a wireless hotspot built in, but it can use, it has a SIM card built in, so it can use SIM card, wireless hotspot, or Ethernet. Same thing with your computer if you happen to have a computer that's got a SIM card inside. The biggest difference that I'm trying to share with you here are that there are many different ways to live stream, but all of them get the job done the same way. They have to bring in together inputs, camera inputs, mic inputs, and then send it out there. Now, the other big part about live streaming that's important to know is where you send your signal to is actually called the Content Delivery Network, the CDN. That's very important. Now, I use YouTube. It's probably the best CDN, in my opinion, out there, namely because it's free, it's set up for video, that's what they've been doing, and it's easy to embed. They've got a music content ID network, which is excellent. So if you have a YouTube partnership, then that will allow you to have some certain liberties with copywritten music that may normally take the song or the video down, but for your purposes would allow it to stay up with a banner ad or something like that. So when you think about people in my line of work walking down the aisle to weddings on the beach or funerals at the funeral home or on location at the graveside, there's music they're always going to broadcast in the background. Most of the time, if you don't have a YouTube partnership, that content will actually be muted or blocked or completely taken down because of the sound, that copywritten sound, because you don't have the ability to use it. You don't have the rights to use that music, and they consider it a public broadcast. If you have a partnership with YouTube, then you do have certain liberties along that way, so that maybe when the song comes on, they'll just put a banner ad on top of it, like click here to find out about soap or something like that. And as not fun as that seems, that usually only happens after YouTube has processed the video. So if you're streaming the music and played, people can watch, then the video is processed when it's done within an hour or so, and then the ads might pop up on them, generally after your entire crowd has already watched the video and you've replaced it with the actual in-camera recordings. These are some kind of technical things, but having that YouTube partnership through that content delivery network means that you get access to their content ID system, which means that you have just some additional liberties with the music that's being played. It's a big deal, it really is. And if you ever try to live stream a concert or something, you'll know why. Your video gets taken down. If your bride and groom are paying you for a live stream, you don't want their video to be taken down, so it's important to have your ducks in a row. That's why I say I like YouTube. The next thing that we're going to talk about here is actually the drone. So people want to talk, as we're talking about the gear, we're going to talk about this. So here's the drone, right? So I just used the Mavic Air 2, right? I've got it registered both as a recreational aircraft as well as a commercial aircraft. And here's the paperwork that goes along with that. And that's important because if you fly under the recreational rules, especially now since a rule change, there are many different kinds of areas that are not available to you to fly, or modes of flying. Specifically with the new rule change that just came out in March, we can now operate drones over top of people as long as they meet a certain weight class and a certain basically liability class, as well as having devices that conceal the rotors so that the rotors can't cause a laceration. And that directly results in you having a commercial pilot's license for drones. So when you get your drone, it's not really as important anymore that you buy the most expensive one, because, to be quite honest, the new DJI Mini 2 will probably be most wedding photographers' best bet because it is the lightest, it will cause the least amount of damage, and it's easier to conceal with prop guards, those propellers, and then not have it impact the flight characteristics as much as on a larger drone. I know that might sound counterintuitive, but that's just how it is. So having the big old bad old drone may not be such a big deal anymore. A smaller, lighter, less injurious kind of drone is actually going to be helpful when you're operating over people. And if you think of a wedding or a group of people or a crowd where you're trying to fly over, smaller is going to be better here in many ways. Going on along with that, licensing it both recreationally and commercially is important so that you can actually use the drone in those operations and get access to the airspace that you need. Your license will get you there, but we'll talk about the licensing here in just a second. I'm also using this controller right here. This is the smart controller. And the reason is quite simple. I need a full-size HDMI output so that I can get to my YoloBox, or I can get to my computer via HDL, an Elgato Cam Link, and get that source of video into the device so that it can stream. Now, recording internally, as compared to a live stream, your internal recordings are going to be much higher quality than the live stream in general. If you're streaming in HD video, YouTube wants like 3 to 6 megabits per second, somewhere in there for a constant stream. That's 3,000 kilobits to 6,000 kilobits per second. Think about this, 3 to 6 megabits. This camera right here records at 100 megabits per second. This one at 150. So we're talking 30 times, 40 times the quality and the data rate. But it's difficult to stream that kind of stuff over an internet connection, right? So some things have to happen. So it is true, with your computer and a dedicated house setup and things like that, or a studio setup, you can probably get a consistent internet signal that would allow you to stream in 4K quality, really high quality video. But on location, on the beach, outside of the studio, something from a router, even a 5G hotspot, with as many people and with the types of things that happen to the network, you're really just not going to stream that high of a stream bit rate and have, because you won't be able to support it. The network's constantly changing. Even if your download speed's 150 megabits per second, you would need at least 5 to 10 megabits per second upload, and usually those function as a ratio, 10% or so. Most of the time when you get people all on the beach and they're all watching and doing stuff, some of that network's bandwidth is being used up by everybody around you. So unless you got a satellite uplink and do it like the TV stations, it can be difficult. So that being said, you usually on your computer have to drop your upload speed, your data rate, to somewhere around 3,000 kilobits, 3 megabits. Well, that's what YoloBox actually does. They have a thing called a constant quality algorithm built right into it, which means that, really fancy talk for it aggressively monitors and makes smaller your data stream so that it can stream better. But here's what happens. You generally get a relatively smooth frame rate that is bouncing between 18 and 36, usually hovering between 24 and 30 throughout, right? That depends on the network. But you also can get such a low quality upload and it's restreaming that sometimes your video may have that low bitrate haze, that fuzz, and that's no fun. Okay, so compare that to here, where you could stream at 4K at 6 frames per second consistently on the beach. I'm just giving an example. You might be able to stream better. The point is, without the proper network, nothing's going to work well. YoloBox aggressively monitors that network so that you can stream in more locations. So some people say they don't like YoloBox because they don't like the quality. Well, I beg to differ. I think YoloBox does an excellent job, specifically considering low bitrate streams or areas on location. Especially better than your computer because you just can't manage those stream settings the same. In something like OBS, you have to set your stream settings up front, and when you do, you can't change it during the stream. If you do, your stream will stop. I will say that if your stream does stop and nothing happens, it's just because the network drops out, OBS won't end your stream. It will just buffer the stream and then get rid of that black non-stream space and compress it back together when your internet connection picks up again. YoloBox won't do that. It will act like a pause and possibly drop your stream. So there's pros and cons to each, and I hope that was helpful to you. I use them both for different things, and after a couple of months of having to use my computer, I'm happy to have YoloBox back to be able to use YoloBox. Now let's talk about how we stream. Once we get up streaming, I like to use 3 cameras: an A camera, a B camera, and then an aerial camera. YoloBox does have 2 HDMI inputs and 1 USB input. Well, I can use an Elgato cam link through that USB input. The problem is there's just not enough horsepower in YoloBox. When you plug in that USB, it even tells you that it may degrade video quality, and it does. So really, YoloBox at this current stage is a 2 input camera as far as my experience has been. Which means, in that case, 1 camera and then either an aerial camera or another B camera, and that will all depend. I would prefer to use 3 cameras for my setups. So, knowing that, you have to get everything like your wireless remotes and things in. You have to get your video over to YoloBox or that, and then you have to actually stream. That's the reason I like using the smart controller. It's because it's got a full-size HDMI input that I can just plug into either my computer or YoloBox. So we've talked about the gear. Let's talk about the licensing, things like that. So I've been flying drones for a long time recreationally, without a license, never commercially. And then recently I went ahead and got my license. I've had this for a little while now. And I have my different registrations and such like that. And getting the license didn't actually get me access to the airspace that I need. I'm in Virginia Beach. Oceana has a gigantic control over this airspace. No one flies down to the ocean front commercially. Obviously, sometimes you see kids and dads and moms out there putting up a drone. Virginia Beach city cops don't really mess with people too much, but it's a very rare occurrence. You could go down to the ocean front and not see any drones in a whole week. And it's because Oceana controls the airspace, and that's a big deal because they have constant patrols. There's helicopters, there's aircraft flying up and down the beach. The Coast Guard is up and down the beach all the time. Just less than 2 nautical miles as a crow flies from the landing strip or from the beach is the landing strip where Oceana takes off from. So that means that anything that happens down at the ocean front in the air has jets, fighter jets flying up top all the time. So getting my license was actually the first step to getting what's called a conditional use authorization or certificate of authorization, a COA. Now I've got this one, and the nice part is I've actually got use. I can use the entire 5 nautical mile airspace around Oceana except for the airspace over top of Oceana installation upon approval from Oceana Tower Control. And that's straight from the FAA. You get that through the FAA drone zone by requesting a waiver, submitting the paperwork, going through the background check and everything else that they do, and they finally approve you. Well, what that means is that now I can actually go down to the ocean front. And why is all of this even any important? The minute that COVID hit because of the pandemic, people started asking about live streaming. and specifically for weddings and of course then funerals. And as that started taking place, I started realizing that, it's time probably, especially when not too many people are on the beach in these different areas because of COVID, that it's time probably to go ahead and start getting some aerial imagery. But the moment that I got my license and started taking photos and video for weddings, I realized that this is just huge, and people have been asking for it everywhere. The aerial footage really makes everything that much better. Having the proper licensing allows you to make that jump to that commercial side much, much easier. And I'm going to roll a couple of commercials throughout this. You might see some things. I may even take off the audio from them, but just to give you an idea, an example of what these things look like.
Welcome back to Fun in the Sun at the Marina by Town Point Park. Welcome back to Norfolk's Waterside District. Love, laugh, and live right here in Norfolk. Watch tugs on the river, tour the battleship Wisconsin, or snap a picture with friends at the pagoda. Whatever you choose, adventure awaits. Maybe sail the 7 seas on the American Rover, or even have your wedding here. All within walking distance of the Waterside District. Welcome back, safely, to Norfolk.
Now moving on along, in order to fly, you have to get a conditional use authorization or a COA. When you get that COA, you can actually call drone operations in your area for whatever airport that is under controlled airspace that you cannot get electronic authorization to fly in through a program or an app called LANC or actually Lance from Kitty Hawk or Before You Fly. Those two apps, both monitored by the FAA. Before You Fly is a government app. Kitty Hawk is a modeler association app. They're both designed to get you authorization in locations where you are flying in controlled airspace. This is much more important nowadays than anything else because the FAA has just opened up with its new rules the ability to fly over people. We talked about that a little bit earlier. So if you are unaware, you can now fly over people. There's a new remote ID part coming up, as well as a requirement, as well as the ability to fly at nighttime with your drone. So the FAA is actually expanding the capable roles of what people using drones can do. Moving on along, we'll talk finally about flying and flying legal, right? So when you fly, it's really important to make sure that you are following the rules, right? Because FAA is making it very easy for you to fly, so there's no reason to risk any kind of a fine. But how do you know that you're flying by the rules? How do you know? There's not really a lot of places to go. Well, first of all, the FAA Drone Zone is your first location for where you can and cannot fly because it has the rules for flying. The next one will be something like skyvector.com. That's a mapping location that actually shows you the sectional charts of your area, so you'll know what kind of airspace that you'll be in. You'll definitely need to have your license to understand those maps a little bit better because the training you would go through to get your license explains to you how to read those maps. Afterwards, you're going to want to check with your municipality, right? Now, here's an important thing. Your local municipality, the state itself, they do not control the airspace up here. The national airspace is actually controlled by the FAA, which means that the locality, like Dare County in North Carolina, they cannot make rules about flying a UAS through their airspace unless they go through a process and get specific flight restrictions or other things like that. They can, however, make rules about what happens on the ground, such as takeoff and landing. So if you find yourself in an area that you cannot take off and land, you need to read those laws closely because you will find out that it says nothing about flying through. Generally, in an email to the city administrator to clarify that will get you some kind of authorization or response, but it's really just as easy to just be polite and email in an area or call in an area where you don't know, specifically the cops too. I've called the police station up in New Jersey a couple years ago when I wanted to fly New Jersey, completely drone. It was on Long Branch. I wanted to fly up there. And I called and got authorization from them to fly. The rules were a little bit different from then. I was flying recreationally, but I thought I had done something wrong. There's 5 squad cars shows up to my location. Turns out they were just interested in seeing the drone. They wanted to see what was going on. So they all came by and they all had a good time, and we just saw some stuff. But by calling ahead, even in that instance, I was able to get authorization where normally I wouldn't be able to, because the people that would come and do the enforcement action already knew I wanted to fly, because they were the ones that said, yeah, we'll allow it. So just follow the rules. And lastly, if you find any of this helpful, as we kind of recap here, don't forget to use my Amazon links down below. Gives me a little kickback. I'm the sponsor of this video. I made it myself, so hopefully that helps. So what did we talk about again? Let's go over it. Live stream. There's lots of different ways. 10,000 foot overview is the easiest way is probably going to be software-based like StreamYard or something like that. The next simplest way is going to be hardware-based, something like YoloBox or the ATEM Mini Pro. And then the next step is going to be something like OBS on your laptop. That's kind of like the difficulty ranges, low, medium to high. The most control, the middle control over your stream, and then something like StreamYard to be the least control. The gear that you're going to use, stuff like this, it doesn't really matter. The DJI just came out with the Air 2S. You know, hey, don't stress. You know, I'd love to have the Air 2S, but there's no reason to get that over this because of what it's going to do. So just get your drone. If you are going to live stream with your drone, you will want a smart controller, or buy a drone that has a controller with a full-size HDMI output. This does not. If you're trying to use your phone at the same time as your controller, that just causes a lot of issues. I've noticed with my iPhone 11 Pro that I had that there was a lot of overheating issues. The screen would actually get really dark when it got close to turning off. And Android phones, they would get really hot and then turn off as well. That's why I went ahead and just got this. One dedicated device to do what I need it to do, and it works great. As far as other live stream gear goes, think about your applications. The larger the sensor, the better it's going to be, but not always. Sometimes you're going to want to zoom. So just pick something that's going to work for you, that's easy to set up. Finally, we talk about the FAA. Make sure you're getting your proper licensing done. If you're just going to fly recreationally, make sure you register your drone. It's $5. Commercially, it's $5. Get both of those if you use them separately. Go ahead and get your license. It's real simple. Get your COA so that you can fly in different locations on Drone Zone so that you can get approval. And then, if for nothing else, if you don't know, make sure that you call the administrator or talk to the police department or whatever. Just call the non-emergency numbers and actually ask. And finally, that means to plan. Make sure you got your flight log and you're planning all your stuff so that you can get all of your flights put down just right, so that you're in the clear. Guys, this has been a long time running. I hope this was very helpful to you. I'm Rob. I'll catch you all on the flip side. Thanks for watching.